Who sings that song? That is so plopped under this prompt. How's that for words? So, whoops, which is not my suit, my go-to, not my suit. That makes absolutely no sense. Lots of hands, lots of fingers, which feels like a nightmare to me. I'm just gonna turn off my timer. So on that, I keep doing the drama mama. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. And welcome to a bit of a conversational, how about that Booktrovert Bingo? How did that go? So I had somebody ask me if I was going to do a video kind of wrapping up Booktrovert Bingo. And if you guys are new here, welcome. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then in October through December of 2022, technically in September, I created my own bingo board to cover the last 92 days of the year. I wanted to create like a reading challenge for myself. I had been participating in so many other reading challenges during the year, and I was really enjoying having prompts to kind of push me in direction to maybe pick up some backlist books or to pick up some books I wanted to, and kind of keep me mood reading because that's the way I function, but also sort of pushing me in the direction of some books that maybe my mood would not have pushed me towards, if that makes any kind of sense. And also I had a really fun time playing in Canva. So I wound up creating this, and thank you to everybody who participated. It was so much fun to see people's posts on Instagram and to connect here, and just everybody who participated in it with me. Thank you so much. It was just like another great reason, or proved, or it just showed me one more time why I love this community so much and why I love doing this so much. And it was fun. It was just fun. So I made it my mission to read 25 books, like one for each prompt. And in some cases I read more than that. I don't know. I just had like this crazy stretch of really good reading, partially driven by audiobooks. And I just had a great time with it. So I am happy to take this as a suggestion for a video and to talk about it. So I 1000% plan to create something new in 2023. I don't know what it is yet, but it served me so well. So I very selfishly want to create something. Not that I didn't make prompts that I had books in mind for completely. Some of them I did, but I really felt like it helped kind of elevate my reading and push my reading and got me, like I said, to read books that I might not have picked up had I not created the bingo. Lots of hands, lots of fingers. So we're going to talk about what I read. I'm not going to review every book. I'm just going to mention which books, and kind of more the idea of this is my process behind the scenes, like how I picked the books I picked. I definitely reshuffled some books as time went on, but really just kind of talk about how my bingo went, and hopefully you guys are interested in hearing it. So without any further ado, let's talk about a postmortem on Booktrovert Bingo. So I'm gonna shimmy to the left, put my stuff up over here on the right. So again, if you are new here, or if you are not new here but you just didn't participate, which is totally cool, here's the bingo board. So this is the original bingo board I created. I did 25 prompts, and what I wanted to do was create prompts that were kind of reflective of me as a person, my reading, my life, Gen X, and really just have it personalized to me. So I did a lot of research on this, and I'm not gonna lie, like I said, I had a ton of fun playing in Canva, like probably way too much fun, but it is a rabbit hole of good times in Canva. So I created this in like the free version of Canva. You can do so many amazing things in it. And then I did some research on like different bingo boards people had done and different reading prompts. And I 1000% had a blast coming up with like the language for each one of the prompts. So what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna show you guys this, and then I will at some stage flip it over to kind of the books that I read. I don't know exactly how I'm going to. I mean, I'm obviously filming this and there's nothing next to me, so all that comes in post-production, as you guys know. So anyway, let's just talk about the books that I read. So I have my computer cheat sheet of what I read this, or what I read for Booktrovert Bingo. Oh my goodness, you guys. It's Sunday morning and I am multitasking while I'm filming here, so my brain is just she doesn't stop. She doesn't stop. Okay, so the first prompt is dark and messed up, because of course it is, because of course I am, and it's like my favorite kind of book to read. I could have read 25 dark and messed up books. And to say, or I should say, that a lot of these books could have fit multiple prompts, but my first pick was Hello Transcriber by Hannah Morrissey. So this is the first book in the Black Harbor series. I got it right after it came out back in 2021 and just didn't read it. And I loved it. Super dark, super atmospheric. We have a police transcriber partnering with kind of a renegade police detective to solve a crime, and it was brilliant. The next book I read is Looking Back. So I did have, back it up for just a second. When I created all of the prompts, I kind of wrote like a few words or a sentence to describe what I was thinking with each one of these prompts. So to me, Looking Back was a backlist book. And I wound up reading The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. I did this as a buddy read with Amanda from The Curly Reader, and I enjoyed this book as well. So this is a book that I'd had on my shelf forever, and I bought it after I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo because so many people said, if you loved Evelyn, you will love this. So of course I bought it, put it on my shelf, and then never read it. So the story structure is similar to Evelyn in that in 13th Tale, we have a writer at the end of her career who decides to come kind of clean about her past, and she hires an unknown biographer and she tells her whole story to her. So similar story structure to Evelyn, but that's kind of where it starts and ends in the similarities. So I did not realize that The 13th Tale was incredibly dark and messed up and gothic. I thought it was more of just like a historical fiction, fun times, which is not my suit, my go-to, not my suit. That makes absolutely no sense. It's not my wheelhouse, but this was actually definitely set in the past. It's a backlist book, and it was just deliciously dark and very much messed up. So very pleased about that one. The next prompt was That's Not My Name, and I read Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. So you guys know I am a massive Riley Sager superfan. And you may or may not know, his name is actually Todd Ritter. So Riley Sager is his pen name. He wrote a handful of books under his, I was gonna say his original name, his real name. And then when he wrote Final Girls, he and his agent decided to send it out under a pen name because there's all these things in publishing where like, if your original books didn't sell, it will impact how people look at more books that you put out, which obviously makes sense. So he was rebranded as Riley Sager, and as we all know, he is just like stratospheric best-selling author now. So I am on a Riley Sager reread path. I have read all of his books. I discovered him with Final Girls, so I've read them in the order they came out. So next up on my read is Home Before Dark, but I reread this one, and I very much enjoyed it. One word title. Kind of self-explanatory. So I read Stargazer by Laurie Petro. This was a dark academia set in the 90s. So this was a really engrossing novel. I found this when I was doing research on my dark academia TBR, which again, if you guys have been here for a minute, you know, creating that TBR completely froze me and I just like didn't read anything on it. But I read this book and I really enjoyed it. So I love some 90s vibes. And this was about two girls who become best friends in high school. They go to college together. And it's really their friendship and their relationship and kind of in a Girls Are Also Nice Here, Lori Elizabeth Flynn way. It is about sort of the best and worst parts. I feel like I've done this in another video too. Best and worst parts of female friendships. And I really enjoyed it. It's definitely messed up. I love a messed up female friendship and I really enjoyed it. Group effort. This one I defined as more than one POV in a book. So I read the book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. I chiefly did this on audio, which I really enjoyed. So this was my second Simone St. James book. I enjoyed this, or I shouldn't say I enjoyed. I found the Sundown Motel to be scarier than this. I didn't find Cold Cases to be particularly scary. There were creepy moments in it. This also, I did a, if you like this, try that. This also has a similar story structure to 13th Tale and Evelyn Hugo, where in this one we have a woman, this infamous lady who was known as the Lady Killer. She was arrested, I want to say it was like 30 years ago, for being a murderess, but she was never convicted. And she's sort of been living in her gothic, creepy house for all these years in this small town. And she winds up finally telling her story to a true crime podcaster in her town who sees her and asks her for an interview. So there's definitely some creepy elements to it. I really enjoyed the story. I'm going to put my hands down, and multiple POVs. So we got our Lady Killer POV and then Shay, who was the podcaster's POV. So very much enjoyed this book. School Ties, this is my dark academia read. I read The Resemblance by Lori Nassett. This was a new release that came out and I picked it up immediately when I heard about it. The cover is stunning. This is one of those books where I was so taken. This is a debut novel. It's set at the University of Georgia. It focuses on the very, very dark side of Greek life. And when the book opens, we have a student who is killed in a hit and run on campus. Lots of witnesses, and our main character is a police detective, and she happens to be on campus visiting her mom, who's a professor at the time of the accident, so she's first on the scene, and everyone who witnesses this says that the driver looks exactly like the boy who was killed, and the driver was smiling when he hit him. So our detective winds up going on the investigation. So we get a lot of police investigation, but I also thought it was a really interesting twists and turns in this, and I thought she did some very unique things with the dark academia and with the police investigation story. But things in this book really shocked me and surprised me, and I loved it. So I will definitely be keeping an eye out for more from her. The next prompt is Outside the Box, and this was to read a book or a story that is sort of different than your own personal experience. So I read Jackal by Aaron E. Adams. This is like a slow burn horror thriller with a lot of social commentary, beautifully written prose, definitely creepy undertones in this book. And we get some past and present timelines in this, and I really enjoyed this book. This was a book that definitely kept me a little bit off kilter because I wasn't quite sure what was happening at some points, and you're not supposed to. Like, it kind of gives you some breadcrumbs along the way. So this is about a woman who makes the reluctant return home to her very small hometown, one of my most favorite tropes, for her best friend's wedding. So she is a Black woman who grew up in a predominantly white town, and she is not jazzed about that small-mindedness of a lot of people in this town. And the night of her best friend's wedding, her best friend's daughter, who is mixed race, goes missing in the woods. And as she starts to investigate, she realizes and recalls when she was in high school, the only other Black girl in her high school also went missing one night in the woods when they were all partying, that this has been going on for years and no one has ever investigated it or solved it or honestly been very concerned about it because it has always been young Black girls who have gone missing. And she starts to look into it and to find out kind of like a who or what is behind it. Very, very creepy, very, very well done. Another one with beautiful writing in it. Loved it. Next prompt is Cover Up. So I read Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney because I'm going to show you guys this cover. It is stunning. So this is a UK special edition cover, which I didn't even know I was getting. So I originally ordered it from the UK because the cover was full of daisies and I thought it was absolutely beautiful. And then I pre-ordered it. And then when my pre-order arrived, this baby showed up. Not mad about it. So it turned out that there were like special edition pre-orders that came out. Thank you. So this is her version of And Then There Were None. That's all you need to know. It was absolutely great. I had a great time with it. The next book is Gifted or Thrifted, so something that you thrift bought or someone gifted it to you. And I read Black Notice by Patricia Cornwell. So I had this book. This is number, I don't even know, in the Kay Scarpetta series. There's going to be a whole bunch of these. And somewhere along the way, I unhauled this book, and it had to have been by accident. I'm still waiting to find it one of these days, but I distinctly remember this cover and finding it terrifying the first time around. But since I am on my Patricia Cornwell reread, I wound up thrifting this book. So I just loved it. I'm a huge fan of the series. It was great. My next prompt was Gen X. So this is anything that was published in or took place in 1965 to 1984, which makes you a Gen Xer. So I thought this was going to be so easy. This actually wound up being harder than I thought it was going to be. And I was actually going to read one of Jess Lowry's books, but then I wound up picking up The Ballad of Opal and Neb, or The Final Ballad of Opal and Neb by Donnie Walton instead, because this is what I was in the mood for. So this is a rock biography, similar in vibes to Daisy Jones, except in this book, we know a lot of the what's up out front. And then, well, we do get interview transcripts, which are great. We also get a first-person point of view woven throughout the book. So it's not strict interviews. It's a bit of both. And the audiobook is phenomenal, which is what everybody told me when I hauled this book last year. and they were not wrong. This is a full cast. I mean, it's like a 20-person audiobook. It's so well done. It takes place in the 70s, and I just absolutely loved it. I thought it was just really, really good, really gripping. And again, that audiobook was amazing. Much like Daisy Jones, it feels like you're eavesdropping on people's conversations, which I kind of love. And it also feels grounded in reality to the point that you are Googling Opal and Nev and their career, and they're not real people, but it makes you believe that they are. Next prompt is New York State of Mind. I was born in New York. I live in New York again now. So this is a book set in New York. Again, seems like something that should have been easy, but it turns out to be harder than I thought it was going to be in some ways. Because I also wanted to read, I didn't want to do all rereads, obviously, although I did a bunch of rereads. But anyway, this is a reread, so I'm eating my own words. This is from Potter's Field by Patricia Cornwell, Kay Scarpetta series. In this one, the book opens when they find a dead body in Central Park, and it is tied to a case. So Kay Scarpetta, our main character, is the Emmy in Virginia, but it is tied to a case that happened in Virginia, so she and her team wind up going to New York, and a bulk of the book takes place there. One of my favorite Patricia Cornwells by far. Next prompt is Page to Screen. So I read The Likeness by Tana French. This is the second book in the Dublin Murder Squad series. So books 1 and 2, In the Woods and The Likeness, were turned into Dublin Murder Squad, which was on Showtime. No, Stars. And I read the 2 books. I had read In the Woods years ago. I reread it, and then I read this, and then I watched the TV show, and the books are better. This book is great. One of my favorite characters is in this book. Cassie Maddox, she's amazing. Center Square is just read a book. That's your freebie. Point of Origin by Patricia Cornwell, part of the Kay Scarpetta series. The next prompt, also read Kay Scarpetta. So this is Murder They Wrote. So it's basically any book that has a murder in it. I read Unnatural Exposure by Patricia Cornwell. I binge listened to a ton of Kay Scarpetta, Patricia Cornwell books. I am trying to reread to catch up to where I was when I quit on the series a few years ago, and then to continue on. So she's going to pop up a lot here. The next prompt is Keep It Cozy. This was doing something cozy while you were reading, or you could read a cozy book if you wanted to. In my case, I read an extremely dark and messed up book, The Family Game by Catherine Steadman, and I did it under a blanket, laying on the couch, sitting by the Christmas tree. This book takes place from Thanksgiving to Christmas, and I loved it. So I did cozy things while reading a completely messed up book. Next prompt is True Story. So Nonfiction November was the partial inspiration for this, but you can obviously read nonfiction all the live long day. And I read The Lazy Genius by Kendra Adachi. So I have followed her on Instagram for a long time, and I've heard a lot of people rave about this book. I've listened to her podcast. I finally read the book. I really connected with this book. So it's like self-help for how to make your life easier for you. And it's like your best friend talking to you about it. She is funny, which I didn't expect it to be so humorous, which I should have known better having followed her online. But it's not necessarily tips where she says, do these 5 things and your life will be easier. But she talks about how to make your life easier, and you figure out what that means to you. So it was easily digestible. It's easy to implement. Like some things are like, what can you do today to make tomorrow easier for you? You know, is it laying out your workout clothes? Is it, prepping your vegetables a couple hours before dinner so when dinner time comes, you just have to throw them in and cook them? So it's like figuring out how to make life easier for you and how to make things easier for you. And sometimes it's like letting some stuff go, and you have to prioritize, like what's the most important thing, how to make it like attainable for you. I'm not doing a good job talking about this book. Don't listen to me, just read the book. It's great. It's great, it's great, it's great. Next prompt is Debut or Something New. In my case, it was something new. I picked up The Widowmaker by Hannah Morrissey. So I actually had the e-arc of this, and then I happened to be tromping through my Barnes & Noble, and it was out early, so I also picked it up early. And this is book number 2 in the Black Harbor series, and I loved it. I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. I just pre-ordered book number 3. Barnes & Noble had their pre-order 25% off sale, and I bought book number 3. So it comes out in October. I can't wait. I can't wait. Next prompt was World Series. So this was inspired by baseball and my love for the New York Mets, and I had hoped they were going to the World Series, but they didn't, but that's okay. 2023 is our year. It's totally fine. So I wound up reading 4 books in the Kay Scarpetta series because I started with All That Remains, which was book number 3 in the series, and it kind of set me on this crazy trajectory of wanting to gobble up all of these books. So I read Cruel and Unusual, The Body Farm, and The Last Precinct were the books that I plopped under this prompt. Plopped under this prompt. How's that for words? The next prompt is 'Tis the Season. So this is, you know, read a book that's a seasonal book in the season in which you're reading it. So from October to December, we had a huge smattering of holidays. I wound up reading How to Survive Your Murder by Danielle Valentine. This took place on Halloween. This is a YA thriller. This is so bloody, and I don't know why I was surprised. It has huge Scream references to it. It's a horror movie in a book. It is a corn maze where people get murdered, and I just absolutely loved it. I was shocked by how dark it went. And again, this is like my own hang up with some YA books, because some YA books do not go dark and messed up, and some lean so far in that I am like clapping and cheering. I was a huge fan of this book. Huge fan. Every time I do that, again, huge mistake. It's like the Julia Roberts. Okay, and the next up is Found in Translation. So this is any book that was translated from one language into the language that you are reading in. So I picked Snowblind by Ragnar Jonasson. This is his Dark Iceland series. I read his Hidden Iceland series, which I very much enjoyed, and this is the first in a 6-book series, and it takes place in Iceland. And it's a police investigation. It's a rookie cop. It is a small isolated town. There are blizzards, there are sinister people who are living there. It's supposed to be the sleepy town where everybody leaves their doors open and nothing bad happens. And sure enough, when the book opens, there is a woman's body face down in the snow, bloody. So bad things happen everywhere. Love this book. I do have the rest of the series, and I am going to continue in it in 2023. And I realized I just filmed a video about series I want to read, and I did not include these books. If you have seen that, consider this my asterisk. Gonna read more Ragnar Jonasson too. So the next prompt is something new in 2022. So after I put this out, I realized this sounded very similar. Like after I published my bingo and was starting to do it. So debut or something new was like a debut book or something new to you, but something new in 2022 was like a recently published book. I know you guys figured it out. The whole point was make it work for you. So I picked Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. So this was a 2022 release. She was also a new to me author, and this was a dual POV romance, but I am not, you guys know, like a straight up romance reader. I like my romance with some darkness and some complications and some messy people, and that's very much what this book was. I really enjoyed this book. It was an age gap romance. She was 10 years older than he was. They are from very different backgrounds. They're from different towns, but they are so drawn together, and I really enjoyed their relationship. I really enjoyed sort of the humor of this book. There's some amazing humor to this book. There's also a lot about expectations that are placed on you kind of when you're a child, like from your family, expectations people have of you, whether it's friends, family, the town you're from, living up to them, defying them, kind of figuring out who you are when you have sort of lived under the weight of those expectations. So I really enjoyed this book. I will definitely be reading more Abby Jimenez in the future. My next prompt is The Best of Friends. So this was some kind of a story about a friend group, and I picked what is definitely my friendship goals, probably one of my favorite duos of all time. And I read Finley Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead. This was a reread for me, which I did in anticipation of book number 3, Finley Donovan Jumps the Gun, which I am almost finished with right now. I was very lucky enough to get an arc of it, and I have to say, you guys, like a little bit of a spoiler alert in terms of my feelings and not in terms of story, but I love this book. So Knocks 'Em Dead was book number 2 in the series, and I really, really enjoyed this book. But Vero and Finley, who Finley is our main character, she is a newly single mom with 2 young kids. Her husband cheated on her with the realtor and left her. She is trying to like make ends meet. Did I say she is a writer? She's a writer. And Vero was their nanny, who Finley's garbage husband fired, but Finley rehires, and they wind up being the best of friends. Like, it is definitely such an amazing friendship. I just love it so much. And it reminds me of, I've talked about this, like Lucy and Ethel meets Christina Applegate and Linda Cardellini from Dead to Me, and I just love the humor and the connection between the two of them, and they are like the Thelma and Louise, like over a cliff, ladies. Just loved it. The next prompt is scare tactics. So it's a book that scares you, which again was open to interpretation, whether you are intimidated by the book, whether the book has scary things in it. And I wound up reading The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. So I buddy read this with Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand and Amber from Books and Beaches. And this book had some genuinely creepy, terrifying things going on in it. So it didn't quite induce nightmares like a book I read recently, The Butcher and the Wren. Totally induced some nightmares, but I found this book to be very spooky, really well done. We had dual timelines. It's like a Vermont farmhouse with a murdery past. We get the past and present. And it's also, I found, one of those books that puts you in a position of saying, like, what would I do? And I feel like there are very complicated answers to the questions that are posed to the characters in this book, especially when it comes to, like, what would you do? And I really, really enjoyed it. So very strong women in this book. Lots of choices are made. There's lots of consequences of choices. There's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of just unraveling of the onion. And I really liked it. So this was my second Jennifer McMahon book, and I really enjoy her writing. Super atmospheric. Definitely kind of freaked me out a little bit. So there you go. The next prompt is isolated vibes. And if you guys have been here for a minute, you know the isolated trope is one of my most favorites ever. I was going to say one of my most favorite books, one of my most favorite tropes. So I wound up reading The Christmas Murder Game by Alexandra Benedict. And this was, I have to say, I thought it was going to be a cozy mystery. It is a family where every year they get together at the family estate and they wind up playing kind of like these riddles and games. And at the end of it, whoever wins it wins a prize. But this year, the prize is that you win the deed to the house. And for our main character, who was like reluctant to come back, she hasn't been back there in years since her mom died. Her aunt promises her that the game will reveal the truth of what actually happened to her mother and about her mother's death. So you get this dynamic between the family. So it's like kind of like an inheritance games where you've got the family vying for something, and it's much darker than I thought it was going to be. Much more malicious. It's a little bit of like a Knives Out feel to it in a lot of ways. Everyone's competing for this deed to the house. And it's this group of cousins, and they were so much more messed up than I thought they were going to be. But they basically wind up going to this family estate, and blizzard ensues, so they are isolated there as well. And when they enter the game in the first place, the deal is that they will stay for the 12 days of Christmas. And the only way you can win is if you stay there for all 12 days. So I really liked it. She has another book that came out, I want to say like end of 2022. And I will pop up the title of it because I can't remember, but it's like The Christmas Murder Train or something. It reminds me of like Murder on the Orient Express, but I will definitely be reading more from her. I really enjoyed this book. And then the last prompt I had was something borrowed. So whether you borrowed it from your library or a friend, I borrowed from the library, and I read Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. So I have only ever read Verity by Colleen Hoover, but I was kind of itching for something palate cleansery. And I had heard about this book on a podcast, and I was like, well, this sounds like one maybe I could get into. So I listened to it, and it was definitely a palate cleanser. Definitely not my normal go-to. I'm just not a romance reader, and I know it's supposed to be kind of like Candy Delicious, but I was sort of laughing through what I think were supposed to be some of like the more serious and like sexy scenes, and maybe it's because of the audiobook, which is no shade to the narrators, but like listening to it sometimes, I felt the same way when I listened to The Kiss Quotient, which I didn't realize was kind of like smutty steamy. I was like, what is he saying? So I feel like sometimes an audiobook, you know, it can like make or break the story. I should stay over here so I'm not blocking this. And it was fine. It was definitely like romancy, and I did actually cry at one point during this book, believe it or not. I shouldn't say believe it or not. I seem to cry all the time. Every time I filmed another video recently where I was like, I don't usually cry during thrillers. I apparently just cry a lot, which is fine. It's totally fine, letting it out. So I did actually cry during this book, but I feel like not during the point that maybe other people would have expected. If you've read the book, I don't know. There was just, and I was out on a walk again when it happened. So of course I was like walking down the street, wiping my tears away. I'm sure the people in my neighborhood are like, who is this chick? Why does she always have her headphones in and crying? Because I'm me. So on that uplifting note, that is my Booktrovert Bingo. But I had such a great time, and I realize it sounds so like narcissistic, like I created a readathon and I really enjoyed doing it, but I did. I had fun with the prompts. I had a good time with it. I definitely had a few books in mind that I wanted to read. So that actually is what I should talk about. So I had definitely planned to read one of the Jess Lowry books because I knew one of them took place in the 70s, and then I wound up reading Opal and Neb instead. My Dark Academia, you guys, if you've been here for a minute, created an entire video of a Dark Academia TBR. There had to be at least 15 books on that list. And I was like, I'm going to read at least one of these and probably more because some of them have isolated vibes. They obviously have friend groups. They have multiple POVs. I was envisioning my bingo board being like a Dark Academia explosion with a couple things peppered in between. I read nothing from that TBR, so deviated off of that hardcore. What else did I have in mind when I was making this? Oh, for like nonfiction November, I have this Belinda Carlisle biography that I have meant to read for years and I haven't read yet. I thrifted this book about the Preppy murder, so I was planning to read that, didn't read it. I have a biography of John Taylor from Duran Duran. I was like gonna do all the nonfiction in November. Didn't do any of it. But I also wound up picking up, I had no plans to read one, if not more, of the Patricia Cornwell series. So I wound up reading that first one, All That Remains, in the beginning of October. And I really enjoyed it. So I found a whole bunch of them on audio from my library. And I just started to get into it again. And I compulsively read those books. I don't think I was never not listening to a Patricia Cornwell book throughout those entire 3 months. Like I would finish one and just like pick up the next one. Like I just was that into it. And I finally ran out of audiobooks, which is kind of why I stopped. And also it wound up being a very natural kind of break in the series for me. So I'm a few books away from where I had read through. And then it'll be like reading new books for me. But I did not intend to read any of those at all. And then even like The Winter People, like Sarah and I had a low-key talk about that book in the past. She and Amber both picked it for 5-star predictions. They asked me if I wanted to read along with them. So I was like, sure, totally works for me. Wound up reading it. So I love that I was able to use these prompts as a guide, but also still be true to my reading. So there was nothing on here where I felt forced to read, which feels like a nightmare to me, to be forced to read a book. There was nothing I didn't want to read because as much as I have books I haven't read yet, I need to do an unhaul lately, not to have 47 videos in one, but I need to do an unhaul lately. I need to do an unhaul soon because there are books that I have lost interest in reading, but every book I purchased or thrifted or was gifted or somebody asked me what I wanted and I was like, here's my wish list, is something at that time I genuinely wanted. And there's so many books that I still genuinely want to read, but I know others I have just lost interest in over time. So all that to say, there's nothing that I read during these 3 months that I didn't want to read. And even though not every book was a 5-star, but not every book is ever a 5-star for me, I enjoyed my reading experience of all of these books. And to me, that's the whole point. So when I started the bingo in October, I just mood read. And kind of what I read, I just plopped it where it fit. And then as we got into November, I was like a little bit more thoughtful. I was like, well, what squares do I need to fill? And then I started to shuffle some books around. Like I think Daisy Darker was at Isolated first. And I feel like she moved someplace else and then she moved to a cover, like beautiful cover. So I wound up kind of rejiggering some along the way. And it really wasn't until December where I was like, all right, which squares are still empty? What books do I have that I could read to fill these? And then which of those books do I feel like reading? So I still went into it very much as a mood reader, without a TBR, without a real plan, in the sense of like I said, I didn't pick 25 books and then create prompts to fit them. That to me makes no sense. So it wound up being great. It just wound up being absolutely great. So I need to figure out kind of what the next bingo idea is that feels natural, because if it doesn't feel natural, there's no point in it to me. And then to come up with some more prompts and stuff. So I know a few people have asked if I'm going to do it again, and I am. I'm not going to wait till next October. I just need to figure out what makes logical sense. And yeah, you guys will be the first to know when that actually happens. So I hope this was helpful, interesting, informative. I don't know if you guys have any questions about the bingo, how I came up with the prompts. I mean, it really was just me sitting around brainstorming and laughing and thinking about books that I love and things that I love and things that just cracked me up in terms of like, that's not my name. It's like that song. Who sings that song? Hold on. The Ting Tings. I don't know why I didn't think of that. That's not my name. So like that was in my head. So I will get songs in my head that make me think of things. Obviously Murder, She Wrote is one of my favorite shows. So Murder, They Wrote became an easy one for me. World Series, like I said, with the Mets, and my Dark and Messed Up. So it was all things that just meant something to me. Gen X, you know, it's all things that had a emotional, personal connection to me. But I just had a really good time doing it. I had a really, really good time doing it. And again, I'm so grateful for everyone who participated. So thank you guys for your support, for humoring me, for entertaining me, for just being excited with me. I mean, it just means so much to me that something that I did kind of very selfishly for myself, just to have a good time, actually resonated with a bunch of people too. So it just means a lot to me that there's a connection there and there's a support there, and that we're very much in this together, which to me is so much part of the fun. So I just want to thank you guys for participating, for being here, for watching, for video ideas. You guys give me some great video ideas. Keep them coming, keep them coming. I am always looking for new video ideas, but let me know. If you did the bingo, if you had a good time with it, like I said, if you have any questions about anything about it, let me know. I'm happy to answer questions if there are any. I don't know if there would be, but any questions for me, just let me know. And until the next video, take care, happy reading, and I'll see you guys really soon. Rambly. All right, thank you guys so much. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.